As this government continues its assaults on the free market, President Obama announced earlier this week his tax plan for the nation's biggest financial institutions. The president's plan calls on taxing bonuses and going after banks and insurance companies whose assets are over $50 billion. This is unconstitutional, it is unfair, and it violates Basic Economics 101. It's unconstitutional because it takes property from banks that did well and compensates the government for the money it loaned to banks and other corporations that did not do well. This is not a tax, the proceeds of which are destined for the government's general coffers in order to fund the government. This is a punishment to the banks that the government either bailed out, like Bank of America, or forced to take money that they did not need and did not want, like BB&T Bank. As such, this constitutes legislative punishment. It constitutes a taking. It imposes liability on one bank because of the bad business judgments of another bank. And because the banks were not even told of this tax at the time the TARP money was given out, it constitutes fraud. All of this is prohibited by the Constitution and by federal law. The concept of punishing successful banks will drive their profitability down, and it will drive unemployment up. This is a straight march to socialism. Bypass Mussolini and go directly to Karl Marx. Here to explain what this means to you is the world's #1 trend forecaster, Gerald Celente of the Trends Research Institute. Jerry, it's a pleasure. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Always great being on with you, Judge.
Doesn't the government understand from history as recently as the Depression, if they take money from the banks have less money to lend, the cost of borrowing goes up, there will be less borrowing to be had, there will be fewer people employed by the borrowers, unemployment will get worse, gross domestic product will go down, and this will have the opposite of what the government claims it wants to bring about.
That's true. And you mentioned about fraud. It's fraud all over the place. It's the big banks. It's the government. You know, Judge, I'm a New Yorker. I'm a Bronx boy, and I've been to Coney Island, and I've been to Palisades Amusement Park, and I know a freak show when I see one. And this is a freak show, whether it's Pelosi, Bonner, Bond, Obama, Bush, Clinton. This is really out of line. We have people doing things, making decisions based on very little knowledge of the understanding of anything other than looking good in the public and making as much money as they can. This whole system it's so corrupt. You mentioned about the too big to fails. Who made this story up? Go back to the beginning. Obama, as a candidate, he said, well, we're bailing them out because if their neighbor's house catches on fire and they've been irresponsible, we have to put out the fire.
Right.
7 months later, Fed Chairman Bernanke on 60 Minutes, they asked him, why are we bailing out these too big to fails? Well, if their house was on fire and they were irresponsible, hey, you want to talk about collusion, Judge? No, this whole thing it's rotten from top to bottom. I heard the woman you had on before. I'm sorry, go on.
The old house on fire is an old FDR one-liner that he used, where he said if your neighbor's house is on fire, you would loan him the garden hose. But that's a canard. That's a fraud, because that would be voluntary action out of the goodness of your heart. It's impossible for the government to be charitable with someone else's money. The government's making these decisions using its power of force to force the decisions on us. Question: what will happen to the economy if the government starts taking billions from the banks? Put aside the fact that they like welfare like everybody else. Put aside the fact that TARP was a fraud. What will happen tomorrow if there are billions less in the banks' vaults and billions more in the government's vaults?
It's bigger than that. Look what's going on. Current events form future trends. Look at the Dow in the last 2 days. As we speak now, adding up yesterday, it's down about, what, over 200 points, 300 almost, 250. lost all the gains since the beginning of the year.
Right.
What's going on? It's worldwide. Every country around the world, China, Australia, the UK, the US, Japan, South Korea, the European Union, they've been dumping money into the system. And now China has a bubble. Their GDP is up over 10%. They announced that they're pulling back in money. All this funny money is drying up. Judge, we're going to see the crash of 2010. They cannot keep inflating this economy by dumping all this phantom money into the system. You need a productive capacity.
We're chatting with Jerry Celente, who's one of the brilliant folks out there that predicted the problems that we've had today. In fact, he has an unbroken string of predicting exactly the problems that are going to happen. What's going to happen in 2010 because the government keeps taking cash out of the private sector and spending it wildly?
We're going to see the markets continue to unfold. We're seeing it already. Look at the job numbers that came out. Only the job creation we had is from stimulus. When the stimulus runs out, the economy declines, and we're heading toward the greatest depression. And I'll tell you what we're concerned about the most. When all else fails, and you're a student of history, they take you to war.
Right.
And that's what we're concerned about.
Right, right, because war, regrettably, is the health of the state. The government can get away with murder, figuratively and literally, in wartime. Jerry Celente, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Freedom Watch.
Thank you, Judge.
You can catch today's show on foxnews.com/freedomwatch and on Sirius 145 XM 168 or online at foxnewstalk.com at 6 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. From New York, defending freedom. Until the next time, stay free, America.